Hi there and welcome to Tech's Potential. I'm Paul Soul, your host. Following more than 3 decades in the Navy, I embarked on a new journey here with the Florida High Tech Corridor as its CEO starting in 2020. This podcast allows me to reflect on what I'm learning every day as CEO, not only about the corridor's 25-year history, but also the future. I get to introduce to you people across the region who inspire me every day and the vision of the corridor for its next 25 years. Together, we'll celebrate the life-changing power of technology. We'll get to meet the innovators who create it and discuss boundary-breaking collaborations that are truly unleashing this region's exponential potential. Hey, hello, everybody. Paul Soul here. I'm excited on our third podcast, and it's our first one-on-one that I get to talk with a very special guest, Terri Willingham. Terri is a partner with the Corridor. She was one of the first people I met when I came into the Corridor. She sent me, as we just talked about, Terri, you sent me a note and introduced yourself, which I thought was great. And like every other connection during that time, a couple of years ago, I was like, who's this? And what's she about? And we kind of hit it off. The reason we're having this discussion really begins to center around the foundation that she helped found. It's the Foundation for Community-Driven Innovation. And Terri, as you and I have gotten to know each other and done a lot of mutual support stuff, I get to go over to your world and see FIRST Robotics. One of the things that has continually come up for the corridor is this idea of innovation at the community level. So I'm curious, maybe as an opener, how did you come to that name? Because it resonates with me and what the corridor does, and I'm interested in hearing that story.
Oh my goodness. Well, first, thank you for having me here. I'm excited to be part of your podcast here, and the conversation is a vital one that I think we need to keep having about innovation at all levels. My husband Steve and I had a nonprofit years before. It was a small nonprofit where we sort of created it just to sort of have opportunities for discounted venues and things like that for the youth robotics programs we were doing, 15 years ago. And at some point we decided we needed to formalize things a little bit more, and we were looking for something that really spoke to what we believe is important in society. And I believe it was Steve who came up with the idea for the Foundation for Community-Driven Innovation, because with our work with youth robotics and our work with the maker community, we had started doing we started with the Tampa Bay Mini Maker Festival in 2012. The things that people do, ordinary people at the ground level, in society, in our communities, in our neighborhoods, is really innovative. The first people who ever created, the things that we even use today were people who were solving everyday problems and coming up with solutions that made their lives easier or their families' lives easier, or created a revenue stream for themselves so that they could survive. And some of the best innovations, the most interesting things, come out of the community, right? Sure, we have really big innovative tech companies and things now, but everything starts at the ground level, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that was the impetus behind creating a nonprofit with that name, the Foundation for Community-Driven Innovation. That's what we love. Those are the things that we celebrate, and those are the things that we think are important in society.
Yeah, and so talk me. That's great, and I especially in these conversations with you and with others, that founding, that start as it kind of sets you on this path. And so talk to me a little bit about what you thought about the community coming into this, and then how you've seen that piece of it develop. I love the way you talk about ground level. That's where the magic happens. Yeah. I think that's great. And I can only imagine in your world with the students that are there, and the support arm that's there to be able to see this kind of stuff. Talk me
Sure.
talk me through the importance of the community piece as your organization has matured.
Sure. So a lot of what we do, and one of my favorite parts of it is, I know we're talking tech here, but part of what really inspires me is the non-tech stuff, right? Because there is tech involved in everything, right? There is technology involved, whether you're looking at how to promote your product or develop your product or a service, create prototypes and things like that. So there's tech involved, but they're not necessarily tech focused companies and tech focused innovations. A lot of things. One of my favorites is when we were doing our equity and entrepreneurship program. One of our participants was creating a percussion product for drummers to assist with hi-hat use, right? In a drum. How often do you hear about that, right? This guy's like, I play drums. There should be a better way to do this, right? And so he's been working on this product. I can go back even further. When I was a kid growing up in rural New Jersey, with very old family members who took me in and were taking care of me, their big thing was they were solving problems that were important to them. And in the part of New Jersey I lived in, clams were a huge thing, and oysters were a big thing. And shucking oysters and opening clams was an everyday topic of discussion, right? And so I had an
Yeah.
uncle who machined a device in the garage that he could put a clam or an oyster in and pop it open. And oh my gosh, you would have think he would have invented electricity in our neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
Everybody came over to see this really cool device because it was exciting and it was accessible and everybody could relate to it, right? I think that kind of innovation, that's innovation, right? We tend to look at all these big things and we're looking at somebody who's creating the next app or creating some other kind of thing, and we're calling that innovative. And maybe it is to a certain degree. But if you're in a community that eats clams and oysters and you really want to get into your food faster, having a technology and having somebody create a simple device to make that happen is innovative, right? They have improved things. They have created something. They have the satisfaction of having created it, and everybody's benefiting from it, right? I love that kind of stuff, and I think it pulls community together, right? Everybody can sort of rally around that. A lot of the innovation that is sort of really huge, medical technologies and things like that, they're important. They're extraordinarily important. Never would say that we need those things.
Yeah.
But it's very hard for people to understand them, right?
Yeah.
Some of them. And so if you can get people to sort of rally around these everyday innovations, these ground level things, these ground level solutions, even look at even medically, Lorenzo's oil. I don't know if anybody still remembers that story, right? A young man who had a very obscure disease, and I'm not even going to pretend to remember what the whole story was. Nobody could come up with a way to treat it. His family looked at what is going on here, and they narrowed it down to the absolute essentials of the problems that the doctors were looking at, and they came up with a treatment for their son. And it's a film called Lorenzo's Oil. Again, ordinary people solving huge intractable problems and even small problems with the resources they have available. And I think the power of that is extraordinary, and that's what moves me. That's what excites me, because that's the kind of thing that can draw more people into science, right?
Yeah.
You can talk about these big lofty things, and kids will look at it and go, "Okay, I don't understand the technology behind this, or that's way beyond me." But I can get behind somebody who came up with a medical solution using olive oils and these accessible kitchen oils, or I can get behind a guy trying to open his clams better, right?
Right.
I had technology, right?
Yeah, sure.
I think I wandered from your question there, but I think that's the community level innovation that I think is so powerful and so engaging and so, vitally important. People who don't have things to do, people who don't have creative agency are unempowered.
Yeah.
Right. They're at the mercy of the world around them. And yet encouraging this kind of creative solution finding, right, is empowering at all levels.
Yeah. Gosh, this is the energy I get out of you, right? Because I just want to, number one, give you a hug and then say, how can I help? Because it's great. One of the terms you highlighted was technology. And so I'm interested, as I craft this question, I'm interested in your definition of technology and if that's changed. And here's the preface to that. When I came to the corridor, and it is the Florida high tech corridor, and I have found myself having to change my own personal definition of technology, because for me, when I first started, it was the super cool high tech stuff. But then I said, and just talking with people like you and others, I realized tech for tech's sake doesn't do it. It sits on a shelf, or it's not, you're talking about tech that's solving big problems through creativity and other things, which I think is monumental at being inclusive into who you invite into your world of innovation. Talk me through just briefly your own definition of technology. Has that changed over time? And how
I
it
think
works with
tech
your
is,
organization?
yeah, I think tech changes what is considered technology, or high tech changes. I mean, the hand plow was considered high tech at one point, right? The scythe, or what it was considered high tech. Anything that farmers could use to make farming less, laborious, or at least quicker and more efficient. Things we look at now in the past seem, primitive, but they were high tech at the time, right? Armor was high tech.
Right.
You look at knights,
Right.
being able to wear something to be your own tank, basically,
Yeah.
that was high tech. And so I think the definitions maybe the definition doesn't change. What is considered tech probably does, right? So technology, to me is anything. And I don't know, technology can be a lot of things, but if you're talking about high tech would be to me anything that can improve or make better or make more efficient a particular everyday process, right?
Yeah.
And I think some of that changes by necessity, but I think at some point in an ordinary society, I think people aren't really much different than they were millennia ago. People
Yeah.
are people, right? We still get, I mean, if you look at, social media 1,000 years ago, it's certainly much different than social media today, but it was still social media, right?
Right.
It moved a little bit slower, but people were still telling stories and writing, putting graffiti on cave walls. So it's,
Right.
it's still there. We still have those same human tendencies. But the things that we need, the things that we say we need, when we do like the youth innovation programs, or the Young Innovators project that we did last summer, that we're working with Florida Inventors Hall of Fame again for this summer. The question we put to the students we wanted to engage in this program were, what is a problem in your life?
Yeah.
Right? That others may share, not just in your life. We don't want something like my mom's annoying, right?
Right. Right.
That's not that kind of problem, right? What is a problem in your life that in talking to other students or other friends, they share?
Yeah.
Right. And now you're starting to sort of narrow this down to a community issue or community challenge. And, and then what would be your approach to creating a solution to alleviate that problem for all the people who share it?
Right. Right.
Right. And the answer to that is some kind of technology. Right. It might be a very basic technology, a very simple thing. The one we had last year was the signs on playgrounds. Right. Remember that?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
It said you get to a playground, they have all these new things. There, if you're some of these things you can't quite figure out what it's supposed to do or how you're supposed to use it.
Yeah.
Their technology was a QR code on each of the different playground sets.
Yeah.
Right. To
As alternative ways to use that's right. I remember that. It's sort of, hey, let kids decide how might you use this playground equipment differently and give that idea to the next kid.
Right. And a QR code, right? To transmit that information to other kids who show up to use this playground equipment.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. That is technology to me.
Sure.
And with respect to how that plays into what we do, our goal is capacity building and empowerment, right? Because ultimately we believe that people who have skills and are encouraged to create their own solutions to the problems that they encounter, who have a supportive environment around doing that, who might be able to create those solutions into revenue streams through small business,
Yeah.
are an empowered society.
Yeah.
Right. And empowered people make better decisions. They feel like they have some agency in the world. You have more critical thinking, and hopefully less of this, polarized experience where everybody is right or wrong or left or right, but people who are able to look at problems in a more holistic way and have discord around it, conversation and discourse around it.
Yeah.
So I think, I think it all,
There's
chains back to
there's
that.
a flow, right? And that's again
Yeah.
what I love about what I've learned from you and your organization is, and been a part of, I get to go visit and I get to see everything from FIRST Robotics to some guy in the corner doing drones. What's that going to mean? And then the creative nature is just, you're creating an environment there for kind of a safe area, a creative area to be able to draw this out of our youngest kids. Is there an age limit to kids that are in your world of creativity and invention? Is there an age, or is there an age group that you focus on?
So I don't think there is necessarily a lower, upper limit. I think everybody's different.
Yeah.
I do know that one of the first things we encountered when we moved here was, and it's really interesting because it's changed a lot, was the a sort of a local cultural sentiment that it was not cool to be interested in stuff going on in here. And if a group of middle or high school students happened by and one was kind of interested and the others went, no, man, there's no reason to go look at that. That's stupid. They'd all leave. And we experienced several times where one would come back by himself or herself and go, what's going on in here?
Yeah.
We need to change that culture where it's not cool to be curious.
Yeah.
Right. That it's okay not to know something, that it's okay to ask questions, to say, I don't understand how this works. How can I learn how this works? Right.
Yeah.
We hear a lot of kids say, oh, I can't do that. And it's like, I don't know that you can't do that. Maybe it's that you don't know how to do that yet.
Right.
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 And maybe when you learn how to do it, you may not want to do it. That's totally different. But, we discourage people saying, I can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like, I don't know. Have you ever tried that?
Right. Right.
Do you even know what that is?
Right.
And so, changing the conversation, changing how we talk about technology and the things around us, and understanding the basic science of things, right? Changing those conversations and making it okay to say, I don't know, which is not something we're allowed to say very often in popular culture. Everybody wants to be an expert.
Right.
Right.
Well, and
you don't need to be.
Yeah. And think about this, again, not a hit on our educational system. Just think about how we train our kids, to be the first to raise their hand to know the answer. And then the flip side is then to, I guess I'm not as good as the person who knows it. And I love your, that courage to be curious piece, that it's okay to be curious, because I think, again, what I remember doing a webinar for you, and I showed the kids my robotics kit, which was a thing of Tinker Toys. I mean, that's what I grew up with. And you can be wildly creative with a drill, with some Tinker Toys, because it just gives these young minds a chance to explore. And I especially like how you've tied this in to the science piece and the technology piece, because it's showing kids a pathway to get there, that it's not just this or that, it's this and that. And it can be cool.
Right.
I think that cultural piece certainly is interesting as well. And I think what you all do there, by having it sort of having it facing so people can kind of see in, is really, really good. So walk us through just briefly the programs that you offer. And then the second question I'm going to ask you is, you're about to move. You're in this great ecosystem called Rhythm at Uptown, and I'm interested in that piece. So talk me through your programs.
Sure. Happy to. So our principal program is our youth STEM education program, which we do mostly through robotics, right? So we have 4 in-house teams here at Amrock that serve about 50 to 60 children in-house in the facility through VEX IQ, which is our elementary school program, First Tech Challenge, which is a middle and high school program, and First Robotics Competition, which is a high school program. Each of the robots gets successively bigger, and the engineering, more complex as you go through it. And as we've talked about before, these are hooks, right, to get the kids interested in doing a competitive STEM program. But there's a lot of other learning that goes on with those, including the communications and teamwork skills and CAD and all those things, programming. So those are our main STEM programs. It also includes drones to some degree. We're expanding our drone program. We're looking at a micro battle bots program using
Oh,
3
cool.
pound and under robots. Yeah, those are fun. We have a little arena for that now. We actually debuted that at the Florida State Fair. It was a lot of fun. We're looking at sumo bots as well. So these are all different platforms that go completely from the competitive in full season robotics programs to now offering more individualized learning opportunities, like with the battle bots. Families could do that, play for, meet up once a month, and we'll have quarterly tournaments, right? So
Right.
that's for those who don't want to commit necessarily, don't have time to commit to a full season. So it just offers more opportunities to keep this as more of a family STEM programming. And that's about our K through 12 program. We also do entrepreneurship, early stage entrepreneurship, and small business redevelopment. So folks who have, and particularly focused on Black, Brown, and women entrepreneurs, early stage entrepreneurs who have a side hustle or who have a small business on the side that they're trying to, generate some income for their families. And then it's basically an entrepreneurial education program that teaches everything from how do you take an idea and is your idea marketable, right? So you don't waste
Right.
time on that if it's not, or how do you make it, or how do you do market research and all those things, media and marketing, to how do you start your own business, and all the personal and business finance education that goes with that. Doing a business model canvas, all the basics that your ordinary hardworking person who might be working 1 or 2 jobs doesn't have time to go to your standard, incubator. They're not Embark level, or we're not,
Sure.
entrepreneurship collaborative center level. They're just at the community level trying to make ends meet, and they're cutting hair in the kitchen or something, right?
Yeah.
And so again, these are like critical infrastructure parts of a community, right?
Yeah.
And so we're able to, hopefully as the area changes, help, bolster families a little bit against some of the gentrification that's going to happen. And so that they have some, some bulwark against that or for that to help them profit from the changes that are taking place. One of our other programs, the other 2 are mostly events. So we have Roboticon, which is our annual youth showcase. It's the largest in the state, and it actually encompasses all kinds of robotics. We have a first robotics competition off season. We're looking at either holding that at the Yingling Center this year, or maybe back at the mall. We did a hybrid version at the mall last year, and that was a lot of fun, because the idea is to introduce people to it, right?
Yeah.
So this is a huge event, has workshops, classes, tours, all sorts of things. And then our Maker Festival, Gulf Coast MakerCon. And so the latter 2 are kind of showcases to help people have a place to show what they made, because that's a huge part of your innovative culture, your tech community is, show and tell, right?
Yeah. Sure.
Where can the community show and tell what they make? So
Yeah.
MakerCon is that, Roboticon is that. And then we also have workforce education programs through automotive technology training, and doing all the ASC training that goes up through fleet maintenance. So
I love the way. Yeah, no, and I love the way you tie it back to a couple of different things. One is the community building piece. You're community builders, and you're
right.
and you keep that central to the discussion and to your mission, which again I think is just fabulous. I think that's one of the areas of the corridor. Again, if we as we think of our niche, that idea of, that's why I wanted to talk to you about, community driven innovation and community building. And what does that mean? I could sense it as the new kid moving down from Maryland, that a lot of this stuff is at the community level and involving not just the STEM group over here, but it's showing that everybody can be a part of that. So I think that's great.
And what good is it if we,
Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, what good is it if it doesn't serve the community, right? If it doesn't lift up the community, and where everybody's still struggling at the ground level,
Yeah.
which is where the economy engine is, right?
Right. No.
And so
Yeah.
I think that's a critical part of it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't want to forget, and I love this conversation. You've got a big move coming up. The
Yep.
organization is moving. You get a little bit of a green field where you kind of go in and can kind of, instead of saying, well, okay, we'll take this space because we've got it. Talk us through where you're moving to and what it looks like for you in the organization.
We're super excited, very grateful to RD Management and Chris Bowen and the Innovation Partnership here in Uptown, who is making possible this space across the hall for us, and it's directly across the hall. So it's going to be basically we're going to doing a moving brigade. We're moving things across the hall.
Yeah.
The space is somewhat bigger. It's probably about 500 square foot bigger. It's just shy of 8,000 square feet. It's a big space. It needs some build out, so we do need to do a little work in there, but it's a much better space now that we have. When we moved into this space, we were basically given about 7,200 square feet and said, can you do something with this? And we went, yes, of course we can. But we basically moved our garage into it, and we didn't have
Right.
a lot of other things, and we ended up with a lot of donated tables and chairs and equipment and 3D printers. But now we have a huge inventory of equipment and supplies that we now have to go through and more intentionally plan into the new space. And so we're very excited about it because now we can create, there's enough room over there. There's separate, individualized spaces. We can create a 3D printing lab. We can have a computer aided drafting lab. We can have a sewing and textiles lab in each of these different rooms, right? That to me is so exciting. You can just go into these rooms and start working.
Yeah.
We don't have to pull those sewing machines out of the cubbies to use, but it does require some build out, right? So we need to do, drop electrical power throughout. We want to put in a good ventilation system for the workshop and the tools. But we're very excited about it. It's
One of the things you talk about in your tagline is making the future, and you've highlighted that in a number of areas where you don't allow folks to say, oh, I can't do that. You're there part of making, including the community building piece. So how important do you see that maker space, the making just in general of making that future and how that fits in with your mission?
Oh my gosh, extremely important. I think everybody needs to feel that they have some ownership in making the future, right?
Mhm.
That it's not happening without them, that it's not happening around them with no input from them, that they're not at the mercy of the future steamrolling them. And sometimes the only way to do that is to be able to put tools in someone's hands or skills or knowledge, so that they have some say or some agency in how they go into that future, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
the degree that they're able. And the we're going back slowly to our open make. So we've started our open makes again, twice a week, twice a month. And open make is simply a free opportunity for anybody who wants to come into the Fab Lab to work on a project. And the way back when we first started, it was like you just show up and you start working. We started something during COVID that we're going to keep. So we actually have RSVP for open make. It's still free. And you tell us what project you're working on. Do you just want a tour, which is fine. You just want to come and play around with stuff. Or do you have a particular project you're working on, and what kind of expert do you need?
Mm.
And then we make sure that the day that they signed up for, we have that expert here.
Mhm.
And recently we had somebody come in who was working on and I'm going to mess it up probably, some sort of a musical art installation project.
Oof.
And they show up with all this stuff. And my son was here, who was basically our resident electronics expert and Arduino and all that stuff. And they show up with this thing, and they had actually had it at the Gasparilla Music Festival, sort of testing it out. And they found a lot of shortcomings with it. And they specifically looked for a maker space to come into to work on it. They looked for an open make opportunity. And they ended up over here, our last open make. They spent like 2 or 3 hours here having discussions, trying to figure out what they wanted to do, talking to Chris and some other people about, what would be the best approach to this. That to me was fabulous, right?
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
walk into the space, no charge, nothing expected of you. Here's my project, and I'm stuck on this part of it,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And what do you think? And it's like, wow, that to me is one of the most glorious parts of this, right? This open
Yeah.
community aspect of it, where anybody can walk in and work on a project. And we've had people do that with other things, ranging from, I want to create a potty seat for my toddler that inspires them to use it more by giving them some sort of a cool cue or musical response or something, to people wanting to etch trophies for, using a laser cutter for some event, that this becomes this trusted, safe, one-stop shop
Yeah.
for, creating and for making and for solving problems and things like that. And I just think that's one of my favorite parts of it.
Yeah.
That maker component is extremely important. People who make things are happy, who can make
Mm.
things are happier, and happier people are hopefully better citizens. And
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 you've highlighted some things and I'm one of the great things about these podcasts is I get to learn, right? And I learn every time I talk to you. And you talk about that agency piece, that equity piece, the having some control and having the ability, and so your focus in that area, I think, is tremendously important. That creativity, you're spawning that creativity that's out there in many groups that never see themselves in that world, which I think is awesome. Before I close it out, is there anything else that I missed, that a question that you wish I would have asked you that I didn't? And
I
it's
don't know. I think we went over just about everything. I will go back to what I always go back to, right? Which is I need more Black and brown mentors. I
yeah.
need
Okay.
Hispanic mentors, right?
Yeah.
We need people here who look like the people in the community we serve.
Yeah.
We need people who are willing to spend time with students so that when kids look through the windows, they see people who look like them, and will
Yeah.
help them with projects and programs and inspire them to be involved. So, I always, that's a critical piece, right? What we do is fun when we sit down and talk about it. At the larger level, is probably not all that sexy and appealing like some of the big, tech and things are, but it's critically important.
Yeah.
And I don't think, and I appreciate you highlighting it. I really
Yeah.
do. I don't think people always get that how important this kind of thing is, and it's only going to work if there are more places like us, right? We're not trying
Yeah.
to be the only game in town. I would like there to be dozens of AMROCs or dozens of spaces like this. It doesn't have to be AMROC, where people can come in and have a place.
Yeah.
The 21st Century Community Center, right?
Yeah.
Every community center should have 3D printers and tools, and
Yeah.
and a place where people can come together to create things and solve problems and fix home appliances and everything
Yeah.
else, right?
No, it's interesting you say that, because even here in like Winter Park opened up a new library, and it's huge. It has a maker space in
Yeah,
it. It has
right.
Orlando
Yeah,
Science Center does. Um,
sure.
libraries in Lake County do. So I'm discovering these things, and
That,
I think it's that critically important piece of the community that we need more with that. So
yeah, and I'll do a shameless plug here. That was our life before we did this. Is we were actually consultants for libraries, and creating maker spaces in public places, and
yeah,
this became a sort of a demonstration space for that. We also didn't mention the professional development arm of what we do. So we train librarians and teachers and others to create these spaces in their schools and libraries. And I've got a couple books out on the topic. So anybody who's interested, look up Maker Spaces and Libraries, a complete guide if you want to put it in your library.
yeah,
Again, the more places we have things like this, the better. And libraries are ideal, right? Because you can just use your library card and have at it. So yeah,
yep.
thank you. I really
No,
appreciate
no,
it.
that's great. And so, folks, she threw out the ask as far as mentors, especially Black and brown, and so really, it's so the kids see themselves. I mean, that's
So
what
we get
that's what.
more. So we get more diversity in tech, right? We keep talking about we want more diversity in tech. We're not going to get more diversity in tech unless we have more diversity in the folks that mentor them.
Yep,
So,
and it starts so early,
mhm.
and you're exactly right. So with that, how do they get a hold of you? And I'm sure
Oh,
we're going to put show notes here, and we'll have
sure.
links and things like that. But what's the easiest way to get a hold of you?
Anybody can reach me, Terri at ffcdi.org. You
Awesome.
can always write me. I will always answer emails, always happy to. That's the best way. Go to our website, amrocktampabay.com, and check out the offerings there. They can sign up as a volunteer right on the website. You can contribute to the different robotics teams on the website. You can get involved in any number of ways. So we would love to have everybody join in. We're going to do a grand reopening once we get set up in the new space later this summer. And we'll send out an invitation and hope we'll get a big crowd out to check the place out and get involved.
I'll be there, and the team is just so excited again to have you as a partner. Thank you, Terri, very much for the time. The editors they've got their work cut out for them to try to trim this down to something. But what you do, God bless you for what you do. We'll stay connected for as long as I'm in this chair. I so cherish that friendship. So with that, thank you again. Hey, thanks so very much for listening to this episode of Tech's Potential. We're excited to provide you with a glimpse into the bright minds and innovations that inspire our next 25 years at the corridor and the future of Florida's techscape. Stay tuned for our next episode.